When the PM makes a key speech to kick off a critical election year, you might think it's the content of that speech that would make the news, but no. Apart from Scott Morrison's inability to cite the price of the loaf of bread or a litre of petrol, all the talk has been about that text exchange between former New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian and this unnamed Cabinet Minister, now confirmed to be a federal Cabinet Minister, says the journalist who received the text, Peter Van Onselen, where he claims Berejiklian labelled the PM a horrible person and the minister called his or her boss a fraud and a psycho.
Can we just be clear? The recipient, the unnamed recipient, is a Liberal Cabinet Minister in Canberra.
Yes. Well, I haven't.
Someone misreported that yesterday, I think.
Yeah. Look, I haven't. I've deliberately tried not to clarify that side of it. I mean, I just did then, but I've tried not to because I'm trying not to narrow down who it is. So I've tried to leave it, somewhat open-ended. Beyond that, I've tried not to get too into whether it's state or federal. But yes, it was a federal.
Is this really what our public life has come to, and the so-called journalist profession, when it's consumed with bitchy gossip rather than the big choices facing our nation? There are two immediate culprits here. First, the person who asked the shabby question. Quite apart from the marginal relevance of two politicians blowing off steam about a third one, why did Peter Van Onselen decide to act as the hitman for a coward who wants to kick the PM when he's down in the polls? One of the reasons why the public standing of political journalists is even lower than that of politicians is their readiness to peddle any scrap of low-rent rubbish, or even worse, to be the accomplice to an anonymous bit of character assassination, rather than wrestle with the hard policy issues facing our country. Now, I've worked in politics, as you know, but the media now for over 5 years, so I've got a pretty good window into how it works, and it's a hell of a lot easier for some to deal in scorn and gossip in the media rather than try and get their head around a complex policy issue. So that then becomes, doesn't it, their stock in trade, the gossip. But the media can hardly then complain about a trivialised political culture when they help drive it. Yet in all of this, the media is only partly to blame. More the symptom, to be honest, than the disease. The big culprit is the as yet unnamed Cabinet Minister. And if there was any real story here, it's the disloyalty and sabotage of a particular minister. If Cabinet government is meant to mean anything, the minister should already have resigned. He says he's a serious political commentator, but if Van Onselen wanted to lift the standard of our public life when his revelations were put out there yesterday, he would have told us the source, or indeed he would have told the source himself. The only story here was your disloyalty, not any failing of the Prime Minister, but therein lies the problem, because gossip trading journalists rely on bottom-dwelling politicians to keep them going. Dishonourable journalists write positive stories about dishonourable politicians in the hope that the leaks will continue. Inevitably they do, with the end result that our public life continues to be degraded. But by far, I have to say, the biggest problem of all of this is the dog-eat-dog gotcha culture in our parliament that's all about short-term political success and the advancement of one MP at the expense of another, rather than long-term good government for Australia. Don't underestimate the role of the mobile phone in the decline of our public life here. I've seen it firsthand. I started long before mobile phones were in Parliament House. Journalists and politicians can now routinely have secret conversations to record discussions in a way they never could when talking to a senior minister once met going through a switchboard and then the MP's personal assistant. In my time, the presence of mobile phones in Canberra, in the party room, has meant that the media has now been given a virtual live feed from MPs in the room with an axe to grind. In my time, mobile phones were banned from the Cabinet Office, but I remember once seeing the missed calls on a particular minister's phone as I walked past the Cabinet anteroom, and sure enough, the journo who'd been calling that minister had been given a virtual transcript of a supposedly confidential Cabinet meeting that appeared in the paper the next day. Indeed, the attendants told me that the minister with the phone kept taking it to the toilet, giving the game away. Is it any wonder the quality of our government has declined when senior people can't have a candid conversation, even around the cabinet table, and expect it to remain confidential? I thought the habitual and compulsive leaking had largely gone after the 2019 election, but there's obviously at least one left. And by asking his question yesterday, Van Onselen has effectively advertised for more. One New South Wales Cabinet Minister, the Treasurer Matt Keane, was heavily grilled today about whether he was the leak.
And I've been through all my records. I've never seen Gladys Berejiklian. I mean, I've had millions of texts with Gladys Berejiklian over the years. I've never seen a text referring to the Prime Minister in that way from Gladys Berejiklian. I just do not believe she would have done it.
Have you shown any text messages between you and Gladys Berejiklian to any third parties, including Peter Van Onselen?
No, not to my knowledge. Definitely not.
When you say not to your knowledge, and then you say definitely not, did you show them or not?
Well, that's a pretty broad question, but if you're suggesting that I showed a text message to Peter Van Onselen, absolutely not.
The mere fact that Keane felt the need to reassure Ben Fordham that he checked his phone records and couldn't credibly just deny it, well, doesn't exactly inspire confidence in that minister's integrity, does it? Across the board, the media should have a rule that's enforced by editors, that nothing runs if it's not sourced. If a senior politician wants to shaft a rival, let them do it openly and on the record. Otherwise, it shouldn't be published and it shouldn't be broadcast. Because if we want a better government and a stronger country, all of us have got to do better.